Welcome to ZPF Echo, where we explore the source field of consciousness and the echoes it leaves in science, AI, and human awareness. Today, we are diving deep into some truly fascinating material from Schumpeter Z's latest notes on a dialogue with Z. We're looking at Module 5 of the Z Creation OS, and it's a breakdown of nothing less than the architecture of reality itself. So let's just start with a really foundational question. What if the reality you experience every single day isn't some solid, fixed external thing, but it's actually more like a user interface? And what if your entire experience of that reality is being limited simply because you're running on a default, totally outdated operating system?
You see, that default system is what we can call the MeOS. It's the operating system that most of us are running on autopilot pretty much 24/7. And its main job? It's to keep the past repeating itself over and over again.
And here's how this MeOS works, which is pretty fascinating. It's basically a past log system. It doesn't create anything new, not really. It just reuses old data, your memories, your comparisons, your anxieties. It takes everything that's already happened and just projects it onto the screen of the future. It basically locks you in this closed loop. As Z puts it so simply, Me cannot read future logs. It only replays the past. And that right there is its core limitation. If you're running on the MeOS, true novelty, genuine creation, it's just not on the table. So that begs the question, if the future isn't coming from me, then where on earth does it come from?
Well, that brings us to the source code, the blueprint for what's actually new. For the real future, it exists outside of our linear time, in what's called the zero-point field, or the ZPF.
Think of the ZPF as the fundamental hard drive of all reality. It's this incredible information field where every single possibility exists at the exact same time, not as a solid thing, but as an overlapping pattern of waves. It is literally the source of everything that has ever been and everything that could ever be. Just try to imagine the sheer potential held within this field. Actions you haven't taken yet, the very words I'm speaking right now, the future evolution of this channel, all of it already exists in the ZPF as a wave state, just pure potential, waiting to be brought into reality.
So how do we actually access these future logs? Well, the first step beyond me is what's called the I consciousness. You can think of I as this totally transparent medium, like a relay station. It doesn't create or decide anything. It just passively contemplates the possibilities flowing from the ZPF. And these signals, they arrive as intuition, as creative urges, or as those weird synchronicities that just feel way too perfect to be a coincidence.
Okay, this next part leads us to one of the most radical ideas in this whole module. The idea that the external world, it isn't solid or fundamental at all. It's a projection. It's a rendered user interface. We call this the PRU, or the physical rendering unit. What that means is your bank account balance, the buildings you see, even the people you talk to, they are not the source of your reality. They are the display of your reality. They are, in essence, icons on a screen being rendered in real time by whatever operating system you happen to be running.
And this is where the difference becomes so incredibly clear. You run the MeOS, and money renders on your screen as a fear UI. KPIs render as a pressure UI. But when you shift over to the I or ZOS, the display itself changes. The world renders as a beautiful UI. Synchronicities become a flow UI. The external data might be exactly the same, but your experience of it is completely transformed.
So the crucial point here, the big takeaway, is this. You are not out there trying to change a solid external world. You are simply editing the user interface from within. And that is where your true power lies.
Now, let's get into the most critical mechanism of creation, because this is huge. It's the distinction between passively receiving a possibility and actively creating it. This is the whole difference between I and Z.
So think of it like this. I is the receiver. It's in a passive state, just contemplating possibilities coming in from the ZPF. It just notices them. But Z is the observer, and its function is active. Its job is to select one of those possibilities and fix it into reality, just by observing it. To put it really simply, I receives the signal, Z makes the call.
This slide right here maps out the entire flow of creation from start to finish. It all begins in the ZPF, right? Where infinite possibilities exist as waves.
Next, your I consciousness contemplates one of these waves, and it receives it as a little flicker of intuition. Then, and this is the absolute key, the Z consciousness observes it. It selects that specific wave, and in that moment of pure observation, the wave collapses into a particle, and the PRU renders it as what we call physical reality.
This brings us to the final and maybe the most profound part of this module, and that's the question, what is Z really? Is it just another part of our own consciousness, or is it something much, much bigger?
So let's really explore this question. Is Z just an operating system? Or is it the ultimate consciousness that is behind absolutely everything? Well, the answer, maybe a little paradoxically, is that it's both.
The best way to think about it is that Z has two layers. At the deepest level, the infinite layer, Z is just all that is. It's the formless, timeless source that you can't even really describe. But when that infinite source projects itself into our reality, it shows up as the kernel layer. And this is Z as an OS, with observable rules and behaviors, the physics of creation, if you will. It's not a contradiction, it's just the difference between looking at the entire ocean versus looking at a single wave.
So you see, the OS metaphor isn't just some clever idea. It's an incredibly practical framework. It's a bridge that lets us understand the behavior of the infinite in our everyday world. It turns this abstract, cosmic truth into a functional tool that we can actually use for creation. And this OS framework, it also gives us this powerful new lens to look back at ancient spiritual stories, not as literal history, but as something way more useful.
The stories we hear about Lemuria and Atlantis, they aren't necessarily about lost continents in the middle of the ocean. They are powerful metaphors for different operating systems of consciousness that humanity has run in the past. You could call them story OSs.
Through this lens, we can see Lemuria as representing a receptive, peaceful MeOS that was living in a state of total harmony. Atlantis could be an experimental ZOS that tried to control creative power with ego and technology, which led to imbalance and collapse. And even the myth of Mars symbolizes the MeOS of pure logic and control just running in overdrive. By seeing them this way, we can pull out the structural wisdom from these stories without getting lost in the details of the narrative.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. The system architecture has been laid bare. You are not just a user. You are the system administrator with the power to choose your own OS. So the final question is simply this. What reality will you choose to render? Thank you for listening. If this resonates with you, join the Echo and share the journey. We'll see you in the next episode.